Yeah, I'm Steve Council. I'm a Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the Department of Computer Science at Brunel. So I get to see all the applications when they come in and make decisions on who we can accept and anyone otherwise. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about myself as we go through the slides. But if we could get the next slide, please. So yeah, so if you're thinking about doing computer science, there's loads and loads of reasons why you might want to study the subject. And on that slide in front of you, there's 4 good reasons, or 4 subjects which embrace the sort of popular and trendy things that are going on at the moment in computer science. There's lots more. These are only a small section of things, such as big data, so handling huge amounts of data that we now have to cope with in everyday life. And that's whatever you do, you're surrounded by data. Companies are collecting data about you, and data is everywhere essentially. So that's big data. Twitter, social media, sort of Facebook, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you all know a little bit about that. The cloud, so storing stuff in the cloud. I'm sure you're familiar with the cloud. Lots and lots of jobs in that area, as well as big data and social media, and of course driverless cars. So that's becoming more and more popular. And I made the silly mistake of saying we wouldn't see driverless cars on the roads for another 20, 30 years, but I might be proved wrong on that. There's a move to get them introduced earlier than that, but let's see how that goes. So yeah, 4 reasons why you want to study computing. The next slide, please. So thank you. So we like to think in computer science our teaching is distinctive. So what you have there is a drone, and I'm sure you'll recognize it as a drone. So we try and introduce as many technologies into our teaching as we can, for example, drones. So we have 15 of those drones, those exact ones you see in front of you, and you can borrow a drone to work with if you want during your studies. So we typically use them for navigating rooms and finding out information from different sources, because it's got a camera on board and obviously a mechanism for processing that. We use Java to do that processing. So our teaching embraces hardware as well as software, but in the interface between those two, between the hardware and the software. So next slide, please. Thank you. We also use robots to teach programming. So we teach Java, and we teach the Java programming language, and we teach Java from first principles. And every student, every new undergraduate first-year student is given a robot, and you have to return it, I'm afraid, because they're not cheap. And you will get to keep that for a year, and you'll do some Java coding using robots. So it's all exciting stuff, but the beauty of using robots is you actually see your code working in a physical sense rather than more abstract on the screen. So we think that helps you learn coding, and we, as I said, we teach you from first principles. So if you haven't done robotics before, if you haven't done programming before, don't worry, we teach that all from scratch. So don't let it frighten you in any way. Give me the next slide, please. Thank you. That's our building. It's relatively new. We've only moved in there 2 years or so ago, and it's on the campus, obviously, in Uxbridge. Big pardon. And we spent 25 to 30 million pounds renovating the building that was there before, and that's a view on the left-hand side of the building in the evening, and on the right-hand side is a picture of what it looks like inside, and that's very much how we like to portray the department, with plenty of spaces for you students to meet your fellow students, to meet staff, and to mingle with staff in a sort of productive and creative way. So that's our new building. And if you come to Brunel, you'll have seminars. You might have some small group teaching in that building. Most of the lectures are in the lecture theatre, but you will meet your tutor and meet fellow students in our new building. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give you a feel for the numbers in our department, broadly speaking, we have 42 academic staff, of which I am one. We have 25 support and research staff, so that's postdoctoral students, postdoctoral staff, and staff who are there to help you if you have any problems. For example, we have a technical support team who will, if you've got a problem with your laptop, will help you sort the problem out. So we have people in our department who will help you if you're stuck with any hardware issues or any software issues, or if you want specific software loaded onto your laptop or PC. We have about 750 undergraduate students, and that includes students who are out on placement as well. So we have placement opportunities, and I'll explain a little bit more about those towards the end of the slide. So that's across all 4 years of our degrees. We have approximately 70 master's students, so people studying for their MSc, and 120 students studying for a PhD, so a doctorate. Next slide, please. Okay, I think so the 2 degrees you can enroll on are business computing or computer science, and within those 2 degrees you can do a straight degree or with what we call a specialism. So for example, you can do computer science, straight computer science degree, or you can come out of Brunel with a computer science degree with AI, artificial intelligence, or digital media and games, or network computing, or software engineering. And I'll explain how that comes about as we go through the next few slides. Equally, for business computing, you can do a straight business computing degree, or one with an e-business specialism, or HCI, human computer interaction specialism, or social media specialism. So those are the options you have, and we like to think we give you flexibility to choose what specific type of degree you come out of Brunel with particularly mindful of those specialisms. So that's a subcategorization of the degrees. The next slide, please. Thank you. So the first year, that's structure of our degree. Yeah, so I should say that to start with. And in the first year, there's a common core of subjects. So you will do the same subjects, whether you are computer science or a business computing student in the first year. In the second year, I think if you advance the slides, I think there's some arrows that might, maybe not. Okay, so in the second year, you can do computer science or business computing. And in the final year, those specialisms which I mentioned, as well as the general computer science or business computing degree. So that's the structure of the degree. And if the next slide, please. So yeah, so that's the options and the transition between the years. So in year 1, the modules are the same, as I said, whether you do business computing or computer science. And we have 5 modules there. Now, I'm going to make an omission here. Some of these modules I know absolutely very little about, so I'm not going to try and pretend I do know. I have taught on 1, 2, 3 of those modules, so I'll talk a little bit about those and give you a flavour of what goes on in those. So introductory programming, let's start at the top, is Java, and we use the robots, and we teach you from first principles, and that's essentially what we teach, programming in Java. The logic and computation is all about Boolean logic, predicate logic, how computers make decisions and how they process information from a logical and computational perspective. The year 1 group project is interesting because every new student, every first year student will be allocated a tutor, and in your first year you'll do a group project with some fellow students where you'll do some coding and you'll produce some deliverables. So that year 1 group project, we include it in the first year because it's to give you a flavour of what it's going to be like working in a team towards a common goal of deliverables and code. So that's the year 1 group projects. They're a very important module in that first year. So 5 modules. 3 of those have given a brief introduction to. The other 2 are essentially statistics and how information systems impact us in organisations and society in general. So next slide, please. So that's year 1 modules. Year 2 modules, we call it level 2. So in brackets, level 2, same thing. Year 1, level 1, year 2, level 2, same thing. In year 2, there's a slight difference in the sense that if you're a computer science student, on the right-hand side, you'll see there's 2 modules, algorithms and their applications, and networks and operating systems. And if you're a business computing student, you'll do 2 modules, business analysis and process modeling, and ICTs in society. So here is where the difference between the 2 degrees starts to show. If you are business computing, you will do those 2 modules, business analysis and process modelling, and ICTs in society, and the 3 modules which are common to both degrees below. So software development, management, usability engineering, year 2 group project. Equally for computer science, you'll do those 2 modules on the right, and the 3 modules below, so 5. So 5 modules in year 2, and 2 of those modules will differ depending whether you're a business computing student or a computer science student. So yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, year 3. So this is where the 2 degrees become even more separate in terms of what options you have and what modules you do. If you're a business computing student, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modules below, immediately below. And for computer science, you'll see 2. I always have to count these. I should know by now. 2, 4, 6, 7. Yeah, 2, 4, 7 modules. If you're a business computing student, you have to choose 3 from those 5 modules. Okay. And if you're a computer science student, you have to choose 3 from that 7 modules. And those are your options. Okay, so in your final year, you have options depending on which degree you're doing, whether business computing or computer science. As well as 3 options, you will do, and there's 2 blocks at the bottom, and that's advanced topics of business computing and computer science, or final year project, and final year project, as I say. So to recap, in your final year, you'll do 5 modules, 3 options, which are chosen from the modules immediately underneath business computing or computer science, and the 2 blocks at the bottom, advanced topics in business computing, stroke computer science, and a final year project. The final year project is interesting because it's worth double any of those other modules. So it's very important. It's an independent piece of work which you do, and you are given a supervisor, and you are expected to produce a 10,000 word document at the end of it. Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier about specialisms. So you might be wondering, well, how do I come out of Brunel, Steve, with a degree in computer science with a specialism in software engineering, for example? Now, I mentioned software engineering because I am a software engineer. So if I was going to do a computer science degree at Brunel, I would do it in computer science with a specialism in software engineering. So let me answer the question, how would I come out of Brunel with a degree in computer science with a specialism in software engineering? Well, 2 conditions must apply. Firstly, I must choose that software engineering option, which 4th down under computer science. I have to do that module. Being a software engineer, wanting to come out of Brunel with a degree in software engineering, computer science with software engineering, I would have to be obliged to choose that module. Also, I would have to choose a final year project right on the bottom, which related strongly to that particular topic, the topic of software engineering. So those are the 2 conditions which would be required for me to satisfy in order to come out of Brunel with a degree in computer science with specialism in software engineering. And equally for the other modules. So for example, if I wanted to come out of Brunel with a degree in business computing with HCI, human computer interaction specialism, I would have to do the module called human computer interaction, which is listed on the business computing modules. And I would have to do a final year project which is strongly geared towards human computer interaction. So it works the same for both degrees. You have to do the module which you want to come out of a specialism with, and you have to do a project in the topic which you want specialising in as well. So hopefully that explains the big distinction between a regular computer science degree and one with a specialism, and equally for business computing and business computing with a specialism. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, I've talked at the moment about a straight 3-year degree. What I haven't talked about is the degree where you are sent out on placement, sort of professional placement there, and that occurs after your 2nd year and before you come back for your final year. So what I'm going to talk about now a little bit is the opportunities for placements. And I was placement director at one point. So although I don't know, it changes all the time, I know a little bit about how it works. But essentially, you can apply for positions at different companies, and you will go for interviews. We will help you with your CV, and we will help you do everything but attend the interview itself. So we will make sure you are prepared fully for interviews for particular jobs. You can come up with your own placement if you want, but what tends to happen is companies will offer placements, and you will just apply through our placements and careers centre. You get paid while you're out on placement. Typically, the average is about 18, 19,000. So you do get paid when you're out on placement, and you get a tutor. If you're unlucky enough, you might have me as a tutor who will visit you on placement twice during your placement, and you, just to make sure you're okay, basically. At the end of the placement, you produce what we call a portfolio, which is an assessed piece of coursework, and it's worth about 11% of the degree. So it is a module in the sense that it is an assessed placement, and if you do well on your placement, then you're contributing significantly towards your final degree classification. So that's placement. And if the next slide, please. Thank you. So we actually have more jobs available in placements than we have students. So if you want a placement, the likelihood is you are more than, and you're willing to put in the effort, brushing up your CV and attending interviews, the chances are you'll get a placement. Okay, we place students all over London, southeast. We have a couple one in Japan at the moment, I believe, one or two in China. So they're based. They can be based anywhere, but majority of placements are based in London, West London, City of London particularly, and Stockley Park, not far from Brunel itself. So there's a list of companies. We have I'm told about 1,500 companies that we've placed students with over the course of the time we've done placements. And Brunel was one of the first universities to introduce placements as part of the degree. But there's a short list. I've highlighted 3 there in particular because I wanted to talk about them just briefly. Let me talk about IBM, because IBM is the placement students we've had have been based in a place called Hursley Park down near Winchester. And it's absolutely fantastic. It's like an old mansion. It was an old airfield during the Second World War, but it's fantastic sports facilities. It's palatial down there in the countryside, just outside Winchester. So if you get a chance to even visit IBM Hursley Park, then do it. But we've had students there at different times. One of our students was captain of the cricket team down at IBM. Volkswagen, the second highlighted, is interesting. We had a student at Volkswagen, and if you work for Volkswagen, you're given a car during the obviously it's a Volkswagen, wouldn't be any other brand, would you're given a car to use over the course of your placement, just as a perk, if you like. One of our students a while back had a bit of an accident in the car they were given. They were absolutely terrified they're going to be asked to pay for the damage. So they went to the line manager and said, "Look, I've had a little bit of an accident." No one was hurt, by the way. No one. They said, "I had a little bit of an accident, bumped the car a little bit. What do I do?" Thinking they'd be told to, well, get your checkbook out or get you know. But anyway, they were told to look in the car park, and so there's huge numbers of new cars in the car park. So go and choose another one, basically. So you can see it doesn't really matter. Not that I'm condoning pranging cars or anything, but anyway. So that was another company. The third one I've highlighted is Formula One. So we've had 2 students at Formula One, and the beauty of, or the good thing about being placed with Formula One is you can go to every single Grand Prix that there is. So you can go to all the Grand Prix free of charge. That, as it stood a couple of years back, that might have changed in the current situation, of course. But yeah, so you can go, lots and lots of perks associated with working for Formula One. And there's only one Grand Prix you can't be guaranteed to get tickets for, and that's the Monaco Grand Prix, because it's very popular. And Monaco is quite a small Grand Prix, so there's limited spaces. But every other one you can jump on a plane and away you go. But anyway, okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, indeed. So Rinesh and Manutu were at Formula One Williams, and I'm not sure they got to drive that one in the same way as our student at Volkswagen did, but certainly they're pretty close to getting on in the seat. But anyway, yeah, just being flippant. that's the sort of cars they were doing work with. One of our students was writing code for the pit lane software. So if you know Formula One, you know that if you come into the pit lane and you're going too fast, you're speeding, you get a penalty. So one of our students was working on the software which took the signals from the track and actually converted it into a time penalty. I don't know exactly what aspect of that they were looking at, but that was the broad remit of the work they were doing. So yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So some of our students who have been on placement and have come back. So Chelsea, placement IBM, as I talked about, and graduated in 2013, went to work for Mercedes Formula One. Zephaniah went to work for BBC. I think he might have spent his placement on BBC at the BBC, but I'm not sure. What tends to happen is you get offered a job. If you do a placement, they'll always offer you a job. Well, they don't always, but they might well offer you a job to come back after your graduation. So that's another good side to placements. You might end up working with a company you do placement on. Finally, Noor. Yep. So Noor did a placement at Vodafone. Noor's actually offered to help with these open days and applicant days we have. So I'm still in touch with Noor. Noor was a graduate in 2019, placement at Vodafone, and now works for Sky doing cybersecurity stuff. And I'm not even allowed to ask what it involves because I'm told off. It's all a bit hush-hush, a bit secure, so I don't bother asking anymore. So that's Chelsea's F&I. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a slide I hate talking about, but it has to be done, I'm afraid. So what do we actually ask for students to provide in terms of qualifications? So we ask for 5 GCSEs, grade C or above, and that must include maths and English. We look for BBB at A-level or DDD at BTEC, but I will say that entry criteria are subject to review every year, and we do, in clearing, we do come down somewhat from the BBB that we advertise. So aim for BBB. I wouldn't suggest in any way not trying to achieve BBB, but in clearing that sometimes comes a bit lower. But that's what we advertise at, BBB and DDD at BTEC, and we do review on a case-by-case basis if there are specific circumstances around the application. So yeah, those are the entry requirements. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, yeah. So all that leaves me to say is thanks ever so much for listening. And if you have any questions, then I'm on UniBuddy as well. So if you want to ask any questions that you didn't want to ask now, then please feel free to put a question on chat. But I'm happy to take questions now. Please don't ask about cybersecurity stuff because I'll have to say no. I'm not even allowed to ask. So, but yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Before I start the questions, I just want to mention the student who's asked the question about the applied chemistry. I'm not sure if you're asking about computer science. If you're referring to a different subject, if you go over in the live feeds, you're able to go into the different subject chats and you can ask your question there. If your question is referring to computer science, please do let me know and I can answer on your behalf. Now, Steve, we do have some questions for you. One of those questions is, what's the language that you teach at Brunel, and can students use a different programming language?
Right. Okay. So yeah, we teach Java. That is the core language because essentially that's not, well, if you listed the most popular industry languages, the languages being used in industry at the moment, Java would be somewhere near the top, if not at the top. So JavaScript, Java, C#, Python would all be up there. So we try to teach a language which is industry standard and which is not going to go away. Java is here to stay. So we try to teach something which makes you as marketable and as a graduate as possible. So yeah, but the good thing is it's like programming language is a bit like bikes. Once you've this is a very poor analogy actually, but let's go with it. If you've ridden one bike, the chances are it doesn't take you too long to, or a car's a better idea. If you've driven one car, you probably find it quite easy to adapt and pick up the rudimentary controls of any other car. The same with languages, programming languages. So if you've learned Java, then you can pick up C# pretty easily. You can pick up C++, you can pick up C reasonably quickly. But in terms of opportunities for students to learn other language, we have plenty of scope for you to do that. In many of the modules, there's some language component, and particularly in your final year and your final year options, you will get opportunities to use other languages. I'll give you an example. One of my final year project students, who's in the final year now, is using Python for their project. Okay, their final year project, because they use Python on their placement. Now, we didn't teach them Python, we taught them Java, but they sufficiently confident in Python now because they've used it on placement and because it's relatively easy to pick up if you know Java, and that's what they're comfortable doing. So you can pick, it's relatively easy to change to languages, and if you're interested in languages, I'm certainly interested in languages, programming languages, then it's reasonably easy to get involved in all sorts of things. If not part of your course, certainly part of the Brunel Technology Society, which does all sorts of stuff, and the hardware, which I mentioned, the drones and the robots. So the robots can be programmed in multiple languages, so you can get involved in all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we teach Java from first principles, but plenty of scope for you to pick up any language you're interested in over the course of your degree. I could talk about this at length, but probably just keep it quite short for now.
Thank you, Steve. We do have a student who's probably missed the beginning of your presentation, and they want to know kind of a very brief course outline. For that student, please, you can obviously catch the presenter later on in the chat. But very briefly, can you kind of explain the course outline?
Yes, so it depends whether you're a business computing or computer science student. So we have a common core in year one of 5 modules, irrespective of whether you're business computing or computer science. So that includes things like logic and computation, so the nuts and bolts of how computers make decisions. The programming module, which is Java, we teach Java from first principles, and something called a group project, which is a project where you're put with fellow students to work on a piece of large coursework. So that's just give you a flavour of 3 of the modules on the first year. In the second year, you do different modules depending on whether you are a computer science or business computing student. And what tends to happen is that if you're a computer science student, the modules become a bit more technical. For example, in year 2, there's a module called algorithms and applications, and that is looking at how things like sorting, searching, sifting, and it gets using algorithms, and that's quite a technical module. So the computer science modules of year 2 tend to be more technical than business computing, where you'll find things like the social and economic impacts of computing, and things which are more relevant to the business side of computing. You'll also do in year 2 something called a group project, which is where, again, as you did in year 1, you'll be put with a group of students to do a group project towards a bit of coursework, and we use Android in that. I should have mentioned that we use Android. We were using Android Java for that. And in your final year, you choose 3 options depending on what you're interested in, and plus 2 modules, including a final year project. And the final year project is a large piece of independent work, which is double weighted, so it's worth twice as much. So you do 5 modules in each year, and the modules vary depending on whether you're computer science or business computing. I haven't mentioned about placement, but I'm hoping that the person was able to catch a bit about placements. But that's a general structure of the 3-year degree, and a 4-year degree. Obviously, it would include a 1-year placement out in a company, which I talked about. So that's a whirlwind tour of the degree, and I missed out lots of information, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Steve. And of course, the student can again catch you in the live chat.
Yeah.
If they have more questions.
Absolutely.
The last question here, Steve, is: do we have any creative computing degrees, if that means anything to you, or anything related?
Creative computing. So, crikey, I could answer that very easily and get out of the difficult question by saying, well, programming is creative. So we do offer creative. I'm not sure what creative means here. If you mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd need to know a bit more about what creative meant, because you could say most computing is creative, particularly programming, but not specifically creative. When if you mean computer games, maybe. Well, there's certainly components of computer games in all computing. So if you're talking about gaming, then yeah, I mean, we do bits and bobs of gaming, but not specifically creative degrees with that title. So no, I would say no, but all computing is creative to a certain extent. So that's an easy way of getting out the question, isn't it?
All right, and another one has just come in here. Let's make this the last one.
Yeah.
How would a general computer science course differ from one catered for something specific like software engineering?
Okay, so I get asked this a lot at open days, and fine. If you want to do a degree in software engineering, that's fine. You'll come out with a degree in software engineering, but that might not give you the broad understanding of the topics in computer science, which a computer science degree would give you. You would probably be fine in terms of job prospects, but if you have an employer who wanted a more broader understanding of different computer science topics, which software engineering is a very broad topic itself, but if you wanted a broad computer science basis, someone with a broad computer science basis, then they might question or might look at you've done a bit more if it was specifically software engineering. And when I say software engineering degree, I mean a degree which was done over 3 years completely, and you come out with a BSc in software engineering. That's not what we do. We offer just computer science or business computing with a specialism. So yes, by all means, if software engineering is your thing, brilliant. But you might find that it narrows your opportunities and your options somewhat when you come to apply for jobs. But maybe that, employers, depends to what extent employers actually look at what you've done on your degree.